Hi, everyone, and welcome to Café IBTTA. I'm Pat Jones. My guest today is Neil Pedersen, Executive Director of the Transportation Research Board. In that role, Neil provides executive direction and leadership to TRB's technical activities, including its annual meeting with over 13,000 attendees, more than 200 technical committees, its conferences, its publications, and much more. Before joining TRB, Neil served for 29 years in management and leadership positions at the Maryland Department of Transportation's State Highway Administration, including as Chief Executive Officer for more than 8 years. Neil, welcome to Café IBTTA. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Pat. It's a pleasure to be here. I've really always appreciated the great leadership that you provide to IBTTA, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you today.
Thanks, Neil. Well, this is Café IBTTA, where we drink coffee or whatever your favorite drink happens to be, and we talk about things that are interesting, relevant, uplifting, and fun. Before we get started, I just have one announcement, and that is about IBTTA's member survey. This Friday is the last day to complete the IBTTA member survey. We thank everybody who's completed it already. If you haven't done the survey yet, please check your junk and spam folders. We really want to hear from you. It'll take you 10 minutes to complete the survey, and it will help us so much as we develop our new strategic plan. Thank you. Well, we are taking your questions, and we want to get started right away with your thoughts and comments. So using the chat function and selecting the option All Panelists and Attendees, please type a word or phrase that describes your thoughts or feelings about the Transportation Research Board. Do that right now in the chat function. Give us your thoughts and feelings about the Transportation Research Board. Great partners, yes. Valuable, innovative, overdose of talent, yeah. Great resource, influential, informative. All right, now they're really rolling in. Futuristic, quality work, professionals. Great research, relevant. All right, Neil, they're fluffing your aura here. You know, there's lots of good stuff coming out of the TRB.
Well, great to hear people appreciate TRB.
Yeah. Well, keep those comments coming in, and we will return to them, I'm sure, often during the show. And Neil, tell us about your career and how you wound up where you are today.
Well, as you mentioned, Pat, I spent most of my career actually at the Maryland Department of Transportation in the State Highway Administration. Actually came out of the planning part of State Highway Administration and became a deputy administrator in year 2000 and administrator in 2003, and had the pleasure of serving actually under two different governors of two different parties as State Highway Administrator for a little over 8 years. During that time, I was very active in TRB as a volunteer. I became a committee member, then chair of a committee, and grew up through the volunteer ranks to become chair of the TRB Executive Committee in 2011. I retired from Maryland DOT in 2011, and after my term as chair of the Executive Committee ended, I joined the TRB staff on the Strategic Highway Research Program, the second Strategic Highway Research Program in 2012. And in 2015, when longtime Executive Director of TRB, Bob Skinner, retired, I was fortunate to be selected to become Executive Director, and I've been in that position since February of 2015.
Well, Neil, we genuinely appreciate your leadership of the Transportation Research Board. It's a multifaceted organization, so many people involved. I think probably most of our listeners know TRB from the huge annual meeting that you put on each year. But tell us a little more about TRB. What should people know about the work of TRB, and how can it be a resource to IBTTA members?
So thanks for that question, Pat. So I like to say that it's sort of like the elephant. Many people are involved in one particular part of TRB. but most don't really have an appreciation for the full breadth of everything that TRB does. We like to say that we have three major functions: convening, research, and advising. As you said, we're best known for our annual meeting. The last in-person meeting that we had in 2020, we had 14,000 attendees. This year we had to do it virtually and we had 20,000 attendees. It is the largest transportation research conference in the world. During an normal in-person annual meeting, we would have 800 sessions and workshops, over 400 committee and subcommittee meetings during a week-long meeting in a very, very intense period. But I certainly found it to be one of the greatest professional development opportunities that I had during the course of my career. We have about 180 standing technical committees and other councils and oversight committees as well. Those standing technical committees cover virtually any topic related to transportation. And we like to call them communities of practice, actually, in the various disciplines within transportation. We either directly sponsor or co-sponsor 50 or so conferences and webinars, conferences and workshops, and over 100 webinars. We have 4 major research programs in highways, transit, airport, behavioral traffic safety. I'm sure that many of your listeners have used NCHRP reports from our National Cooperative Highway Research Program. These are very application-oriented research programs. We like to pride ourselves in terms of producing products that can be used by transportation professionals. We publish a journal called the Transportation Research Record. It has about 900 papers published annually. We maintain the largest transportation research bibliographic database in the world with about 1.25 million records. A resource that I think is underused and underappreciated. But again, it covers virtually any topic you can think of related to transportation. I really would encourage listeners to take advantage of that. You can access it through the TRB website. And then we are part of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And as part of the National Academies, we do independent, what we call consensus studies, in which we advise the federal government in matters of policy, often where there's either controversy or perhaps disagreement. And we convene experts with panels that are balanced and come out with recommendations. And National Academies reports carry tremendous credibility, both with Congress and the administration. So that's TRB 101 very quickly. And thank you for that opportunity to talk about TRB.
Well, I know you could probably talk for hours about it, but I was struck by the 1.25 million records of research reports and subjects. It sounds like TRB is sort of the Library of Congress for transportation research. Would you say that's an accurate characterization?
Well, I think that's a compliment, but I think it's not too far off. I think you can find information on almost any topic that you would be interested in related to transportation and what the latest research is. And we put a lot of effort into creating links to many of the documents that are in the bibliographic database as well.
Neil, one of our viewers, Jennifer Hara, says when she was commenting about TRB, she used the phrase great source of innovative thinking. And this makes me think about what priority issues there are in TRB going on right now. Tell us some of the priority issues that measure up to that great source of innovative thinking.
So about every 5 years or so, our executive committee publishes a document called Critical Issues in Transportation. Last one came out in 2019, and that helps guide a lot of our programs in terms of the issues that we're looking at. I find the easiest way to get to it, the way I do it as well, is just Google critical issues in transportation 2019, and you'll get access to it. But obviously, right now, there's a lot of attention being paid to the impacts of COVID-19, issues associated with changes in travel demand associated with COVID-19, a lot of public health issues associated with COVID-19, and actually the relationship between transportation and public health in general. We're very focused on equity issues right now, as is the entire nation, and really doing a lot of work in that area as well. We're very focused on climate change related issues. National Academies just issued in February a major report on decarbonization, including a lot of recommendations related to transportation itself. We're very engaged with the administration right now on these issues, but we cover the full range of issues that really are topical right now, whether it be automated vehicles, connected vehicles, shared mobility, but really looking at what the impacts are of some of the major changes, demographic changes that are taking place, governance issues, finance issues. We're very, very pleased to be co-sponsoring the upcoming finance workshop with IBTTA, and I look forward to being on the introductory panel with you on that as well, but full range of issues.
Our guest today is Neil Pedersen. He's the Executive Director of the Transportation Research Board, and we are taking your questions and comments. Please feel free to write your question or comment in the chat function at any time. And while we're waiting for your questions, Neil, I want to recite a quote to you that is on the facade of the Keck Center of the National Academies, which is where your office is. This Albert Einstein quote goes, "The right to search for truth implies also a duty. One must not conceal any part of what one has recognized to be true." Talk to me about that. What's the significance of that Albert Einstein quote to you?
So we at TRB, and I personally really take a great deal of pride in really trying to make sure that we have an evidence basis for everything that we do, a science basis for it as well. And when you undertake research in particular, as we do, you're often getting into issues where you don't know what the answers are. That's what research is all about. And it's really, really important that we uncover what the truth is, that the evidence really leads us to what the truth is as well. During my career at Maryland Department of Transportation, I really took it, was very, very careful to be making sure that I was seen as that objective, technical expert or state highway administrator, and that I actually used a lot of research done by the Transportation Research Board as well as others in terms of developing testimony, for example, before the General Assembly. And I really tried very, very carefully to make sure that they saw me as not being someone that was engaging in partisan politics, but really was trying to give them the best information possible. And that's really what we try to do at Transportation Research Board as well. I mentioned that I was in a political appointed position as state highway administrator, actually under two different governors of two different parties. And I think the reason I was able to do that was that I was seen as that neutral, objective third party, or objective technical expert on topics.
Neil, I want to drill down a little more deeply into some of the priority issues you mentioned. You talked about equity and the effect of climate change on transportation really emerging as big issues. And I know that you're working closely with the Biden administration on some of these issues to be able to provide valuable information. And it seems that President Biden has charged Secretary Buttigieg to sort of be the point of the spear, not only on transportation issues, but things like equity and climate change. Talk to us about how TRB could or can respond in research on these kinds of issues.
So I'm going to start with equity. Obviously, I think the last year in particular has really brought to the attention of the country and surfaced a number of issues related to inequity that we have had in our society. And transportation certainly has been a contributing factor to that, whether it is the construction of interstate highways through minority neighborhoods in urban areas, whether it is inequitable access that is provided, particularly to low-income areas or minority areas as well. Just think about, I'm going to use a different mode than your members really are involved in, but just the funding that we have had for transit has tended to go towards major capital projects that provide access to choice riders to suburban areas in a lot of cases, bypassing low-income areas and not providing as good access. During the COVID-19 pandemic, essential workers had to be using transit to be able to get to their jobs so that the rest of us, like we are now, we're able to continue to work from home. And ensuring that access was provided for essential workers is something that is critically important. In terms of climate change, transportation now, unfortunately, has become the #1 contributor to greenhouse gas emissions of all of the sectors in the United States. We really have a responsibility to be looking at what we can be doing to be trying to reduce emissions from transportation. So whether it is really looking at issues as to how we can be kickstarting the conversion to electric vehicles for passenger vehicles, or an area where I see some tremendous potential now is actually in terms of electric trucks, electrically powered trucks. The emissions from trucks are one of the big sources of greenhouse gas emissions. That it is a big challenge in terms of getting the power that is necessary from electric vehicles, but we're making tremendous progress in that area as well. And perhaps the biggest challenge we're going to have is reducing emissions from aviation. The emissions from airplanes are a huge, huge impact. And in order to get the power that is necessary for aviation, it's going to be a big challenge to be able to try to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from airplanes.
Neil, it's amazing to think how significant the impact of transportation is, certainly on climate change, but also on equity issues. So many of the issues that are coming to the fore in these current years are issues that transportation plays a huge role. And speaking of that, we've got a question from Sean Sullivan. He's asking about VMT. He's asking for your opinion, Neil. Maybe you've got a scientific view on this as well. How large a role do you expect VMT-based funding and technology to play in 5 years for passenger cars? And maybe I'll add to that 10 or 15 years. What do you think, Neil?
So it's interesting. This is an issue that I think there's going to be a lot of discussion at our upcoming finance conference. So there are a number of states right now that are underway with pilots in terms of charging by the mile. Oregon obviously was the first state that undertook it, but there are many other states that are doing pilots on it now. It is an area that Congress and the federal government is interested in continuing to try to encourage and provide pilot monies for it as well. There are still implementation challenges that we have in front of us, which will be a big part of what research will be looking at as well in terms of how we can try to overcome some of those implementation challenges. Not the least of which is ultimately getting the confidence of the traveling public that if they are their BMT is going to be tracked, that their privacy concerns are being adequately addressed. I do think eventually we will get there. I don't think we've gotten there as fast as some had hoped. And I think we still have some tremendous challenges in front of us. And when we have those types of challenges, research has a very important role in terms of trying to develop information to be addressing those challenges. You asked about 5 years. I think we'll see more and more pilots. I don't think we'll see widespread implementation within 5 years, but I certainly expect within 10 to 15 years, that will be the direction that we will be moving.
As we think about reauthorization, and since we're talking about VMT, I'll wave the IBTTA flag for a moment. It seems that both houses of Congress are intent on having some type of VMT national pilot in the next reauthorization. And certainly the members of IBTTA, both on the agency side and as well as the integrators, vendors, consultants, have tremendous experience in charging people for use of facilities. And we are very hopeful that we will have a seat at the table if there's some type of national advisory board overlooking that national pilot. And probably, I would imagine TRB is going to have a big role in that as well.
Yes, well, that we like to say that one of the things that we do is convene the experts. And there are a lot of experts in this area that we will continue to convene to be looking at the issue. And you're absolutely right that IBTTA members are amongst those experts that we really need to call upon. We look forward to working together with you on that issue.
Neil, I want to read a quote that came from a press release announcing your selection as executive director of TRB. It says, throughout his tenure at the Maryland State Highway Administration, Pedersen remained technically engaged in the science and art of planning and engineering, while providing highly effective management and leadership, often in a politically charged context. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So I'm actually going to do it in the context of a toll facility that I was very involved in, actually over the course of my entire career at Maryland State Highway Administration, the Intercounty Connector, which is a toll facility that opened in 2011, 2012 timeframe to connect Interstate 270 to Interstate 95 north of Washington, D.C. Very, very politically charged project. Had a very, very long history associated with it. And ultimately, in order for us to be able to get the support that we needed to be able to go forward with it, and in order for us to ultimately be able to get the approvals that we needed from about a dozen different federal and state environmental resource agencies, it was our credibility in terms of developing objective technical information and presenting it, both the pros and the cons, the good news and the not so good news associated with it, in any form in which we were making presentations, whether it was to environmental resource agencies, legislative committees, community groups, elected officials. And we just went out of our way to be making sure that we were straight up in terms of presenting the best technical data and information that we had available. And I think that was one of the keys ultimately to our being able to get past what had been a history of about close to 50 years of attempts to try to get that facility built, and our ability to ultimately be able to get both the support and the approvals that we needed to go forward. And today, people in suburban Maryland are enjoying the benefits of that facility.
Neil, I attended that opening on a cold, rainy day, and I remember on the podium or on the dais, there were every politician you could possibly imagine that had anything to do with Maryland was there. And I recall hearing at least one politician say, you know, I see politicians here who were vehemently opposed to this project, and today are some of its biggest supporters. So it sounds like your information-based approach, your science-based approach, and your persistence really paid off.
I'm not sure that we could have gotten that project approved if it was just seen as being a partisan issue. Ultimately, it required support from both parties. It was approved under a Republican governor, but with a very, very heavily Democratic legislature, two county councils in two counties in which it was located that were all Democratic as well. So I really felt I owed it to all of them to be providing them the best objective information possible. And I think that's ultimately how we were able to be successful.
The success you achieved there strikes me as a good example of leadership and also good governance. In the association field, we like to talk about knowledge-based governance, that your association leadership, your association board will focus on an issue and look at it through the prism of knowledge. What do we really know about this issue, as opposed to politics, following whoever it is that may be barking the loudest. Talk to us a little bit about your views on leadership and governance in these kinds of situations.
So perhaps some of your listeners have heard of the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. What Jim Collins did in terms of his research was he had some criteria in terms of successful companies. And he was particularly interested in those companies that had sustained growth, not companies that grew, had success, had a lot of notoriety, but then faded away and didn't maintain that success. And he ultimately used criteria to select, I believe it was something on the order of about a dozen companies.
Right.
To the characteristics of those companies. And every single one of them had what he called a level 5 leader, and went through and described in a great deal of detail the characteristics of level 5 leader. But I very much subscribe to that and hope that that's what I try to achieve in terms of my leadership as well. He describes leaders that are very driven, but at the same time, very humble. And they're not out front trying to be flashy. They're there really to be ensuring the success of the organization, not their personal success. They're there to take the blame when things go wrong, but to really give credit to the staff and participants within the organization about the success of the organization itself. They take the long view in terms of success, not what is going to be seen as being a short-term success. It's those types of leaders ultimately that end up leading the most successful organizations. And an awful lot of what he describes in that book, that chapter of that book on level 5 leadership is very much what I subscribe to as well. I don't always succeed, but it's what I try to strive to. And any of your listeners who have not read that chapter of Good to Great, I really would commend it to them.
Neil, beautiful summary of Good to Great, probably one of the best ones I've heard. Excellent book. Neil, I'm going to make a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to come back to you for some final words of wisdom. So IBTTA members and everybody who's watching today, don't forget to complete the survey that you'll receive at the end of Café IBTTA. We really want to hear your thoughts and views so we can continually improve. Next week, April 14th, our guest on Café IBTTA is Farzan Ahmed. He's the executive director of the Ohio Turnpike and Infrastructure Commission, a member of the board of IBTTA, and also co-chair of the Task Force on Diversity, Social, and Racial Inclusion. Tomorrow, April 8th, we have a webinar, Women Driving Policy, featuring our own Diane Scicchetti, Commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Transportation and first Vice President of IBTTA, Victoria Sheehan, Commissioner of the New Hampshire DOT and President of AASHTO, and Stephanie Pollack, Acting Administrator of the U.S. Federal Highway Administration. Don't miss it. April 13 through 16, come to the Emerging Technologies Committee Working Group's pilot programs, a multi-day event in which 3 of the emerging technology working groups will discuss next steps and potential pilot programs for the remainder of 2021. Many other events in April, including the Finance Summit, the Board of Directors meeting, and Tolling 101 for young professionals. And in May, check out the program and register for the 4-day Technology Summit. Visit the IBTTA website to learn about all our upcoming events. And please don't forget to fill out the survey at the end of Café IBTTA. Well, Neil, what final words of wisdom do you have for us before we sign off?
So Pat, I want to first start by saying thank you for this opportunity. I really, really value and appreciate the partnership that we have with between TRB and IBTTA. It just struck me as you were talking about tomorrow's program that both Diane Scicchetti and Stephanie Pollack are members of my executive committee. So there is a lot of interaction between the 2 organizations. I would really encourage any of the listeners who are not involved in TRB, go check out our website at trb.org. It's very easy to remember. And I would encourage you to sign up for our e-newsletter, which you can access at that website. We really look forward to continuing our partnership and working together on issues like finance and VMT charging and others where we have common interest in. Again, Pat, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Neil, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your friendship and partnership. I appreciate your humble leadership, your humble and visionary leadership, and we appreciate everything that TRB and IBTTA are doing together. So thank you so much for being part of the program. And to all our viewers, we say, be safe, keep in touch, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you, Pat.